Last week on Sunday evening, we looked at the compassion of Christ. Tonight, I want to look at the conviction of Christ, and we might even get on to the commission of Christ this evening, the conviction of Christ. But I want you to take your Bibles. I'm going to go back to where we were last week here in Matthew chapter number 9. Matthew chapter number 9, and we began in verse number 35. We're dealing with bearing fruit as Christian, how to bear spiritual fruit. And of course, we looked at the root system, and we focused on that for quite a bit. And we're looking at other fruits beyond the Galatians 5:22 and 23 fruits of the Spirit. Looking at other areas, other fruits that we are told to bear. We looked for a few weeks at the fruits of repentance and John the Baptist's message. And now we look at the fruits of compassion. And we are told to have this same compassion that Christ does. And when we can grab a hold of this same compassion that Christ does, we see the world around us in the same way that God does. You're in Matthew chapter number 9. Look at verse number 35. It says this, Matthew 9:35, "And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then saith he unto his disciples, The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he'll send forth laborers into the harvest." We looked last week in verse number 36 at the compassion of Jesus. We said that he was engaged. He wasn't just present in society. He was engaged into the lives of people around him. He had the benefit of being able to see their past and their future. He had the benefit of being able to look into the windows of their souls and to see what kind of person they were. But even without those benefits, you and I are still to have that same kind of compassion. We were told last week that mine eye affecteth mine heart because of all the daughters of my city in the book of Lamentations. We also said last week that he was not just engaged, but he was also empathetic. That he did more than just see the needs. He was personally stirred to meet them. Heard somebody say this morning, there's a difference between having a heart for the poor and having a mind for the poor. It's one thing to go and see a TV commercial where they're depicting these starving children in Africa somewhere, or they'll show you these little puppies that are frail with these big sad puppy dog eyes, and they're shaking because they're malnourished, and they show you that, of course, they have to have the special soft music that goes behind it, and then they have to hire that special actor whose voice just really just makes you want to just throw your billfold, at the screen and just take all my money, please. And they set up those TV commercials just so to really pull on your heartstrings. And it's one thing for it to affect your heart. It's a whole other thing for it to affect your mind, so that you begin to think about how you can meet those needs. You can begin to plan, and also to where it affects your hands, and it affects your feet, and it affects your mouth, so that you put it into action. Maybe we feel touched by this village, third world country needing a better water supply. Sometimes we even feel touched by the spiritual needs of other people. Maybe a missionary presentation or video we watch, and we see the faces of people as they're engaged in voodoo or other worship of false gods. We see what the things that they have done to their bodies, or even done to their children's bodies in the name of religion. And maybe it stirs your heart to watch those videos. You feel touched. But what about those in your own community? What about those sleeping in the woods nearby because of drug abuse and alcoholism? No longer do they have family or homes. We could easily just pass it off and say, well, you know what? It's their own fault. They made their bed, they could sleep in it. And in one sense, well, sure, it is their fault. Thankfully, Jesus didn't look down at us and say, well, you know what, it's their own fault. Because he'd be absolutely right. Praise the Lord, God didn't look down at the Garden of Eden and say, what in the world? I gave you 99.9% amazing, and you chose the 0.1% sin. You know what? I set you up to succeed, and somehow you still found a way to fail. Never mind. Y'all just do your own thing and suffer your own consequences. God could have looked at Adam and Eve and said, I'm just going to create another earth, and I'm going to create a couple other people, and I'm going to try this again, and let's see if they can keep their act together. Praise the Lord, he didn't do that. You and I will be in a very hopeless situation. However, how many times do we see a video like that? How many times do we get moved by somebody else's need, and then just a few minutes later, we're moving right on with our lives, as if it never even happened? You know, if we really believe something that God has called us to do, it is going to change our lives. It is going to get a hold of us. It's going to change the way we live, because our belief determines our behavior. You say, well, that skipped me. No, you just aren't being honest about what you believe. Our belief determines our behavior. And so you ask yourself, well, do I believe in eternity, that there is life after death? Do I believe that there is a God? Do I believe there's a heaven and hell? Do I believe what the Bible has to say about me going to either heaven or hell? Do I believe that there is a way to heaven? Do I believe what that way to heaven is? Do I believe that Jesus is the Son of God? And we can say yes, 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 yes in answer to these questions, and then we look at how we behave. Has your belief affected your behavior? Well, as a matter of fact, it always does. It may be that your mind has decided something, but that belief hasn't reached your heart. And therefore, it hasn't reached your actions either. But our beliefs do have a tendency to determine our behavior. Jesus acted on compassion. Why? Why did Jesus act in compassion to these folks? Jesus could have been far aloof to the needs of others. He is infinitely higher than mankind. So why then did he stoop to our needs? What were the convictions of Jesus? Number one, there is an abundant need. We look in verse number 37. He says, the harvest truly is plenteous and the laborers are few. Remember, he looked out on the crowd and he was moved with compassion. Why? Because they fainted. He saw their struggles. He saw that they were bearing down under the weight of the Roman Empire, exacting taxation out of them. And not only the Roman Empire, but even their own religious leaders and political leaders were exacting and squeezing every last drop that remained from them, so that the people who many were trying to do what's right were getting no help from the religious fathers. They were getting no help from the political fathers. They were instead just being wrung out. They were fainting, about to faint. Jesus saw this. They were so busy, so working so hard, trying to manage everything through their own strength, because they were not being taught the truth. The truth was being withheld from them purposefully by others who wished to control them. And he watched them fainting. And it says, and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. What happens to sheep who have no shepherd? Well, maybe if it's early on after they just had their wool sheared, then their wool wouldn't be such a big problem, but they would wander around continually looking for food and for water. And sheep don't have much of a mind for shelter. They're not smart enough to come back to shelter on their own. Somebody has got to push them in that direction or call them in the direction of shelter. They have no way of defending themselves. They have no way of foreseeing possible dangers. And so they just keep going, eating this blade of grass and then that blade of grass, and then they go over the cliff, reaching for yet another blade of grass. But then their wool begins to grow. It begins to get saturated with water. It begins to get saturated with the bristles and the thorns. Things that they get themselves caught in. I don't know what I was trying to say there. But they get all of that caught up in the mangled in their wool, and it gets mangy, and they can get infections underneath that wool, and there's nobody there to help shear that and to put salve on it and to fix those infections. They can fall and break something. Of course, they can become prey to animals attacking animals, and there's nobody there to protect them. A wild sheep isn't going to survive long. That's why the wild sheep in the Midwest, they live on the mountaintops, because that's the only place that they can be that is relatively safe. And even then, the mountain lions still get to them. Even then, the hunters, still get to them. He looked at them and he saw a sheep without a shepherd. He saw them and they were just sad looking, and they were falling apart. And they were just going after whatever made their belly feel better, even though it led to destruction and injury and the hurt and the harm of others. And he saw an abundant need. In the book of Joel, chapter number 3, I won't make you turn there because you'll still be turning there by the time I finish the sermon. But if you wanted to turn there, you can. Joel chapter number 3, I'm going to read 4 verses. Joel 3 verse 11 says this: "Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about." And listen to the word picture that is being used here. See if it sounds familiar. "Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Get ye down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision." And we think forward into the future about this time where the wicked are gathered there into the valley beside Israel. And God himself comes down from heaven. Jesus Christ on his horse, us following along, dressed in white on our own white horses, and he comes down and he treads down the grapes of wrath, destroys all of them. And he describes it here as being the press is full, the press for the wine press or the juice press is full, and the juice and wine is just overflowing around the edges. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. But we see that same image. And we saw that same image in the book of Revelation too. "Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe." When Jesus spoke of people as a harvest, he wasn't just objectifying them and turning them into items because he no longer cared about them. That was not it at all. Remember, when the Bible uses these images, it's for our benefit. He's using something we can grasp and understand and see, comparing it to something maybe beyond our grasp, to help us to be able to understand how God views humanity. There will be a time when the harvest does come, but there's a couple different harvests. I'm going to talk about that in just a bit. There are still millions of people, though. Millions of people, many of which are right here in our community, who do not know the truth. They don't know anything about Jesus. They especially don't know the real Jesus of the Bible. And you're well aware, a harvest can only be gathered in a certain amount of time, a certain window of time. A farmer who wants to harvest his grain, he will go out and he will pull some of the fruit off of the heads of those grains, off the stalks, and he'll take them and he'll crush them up and he'll stick them inside a little device that will measure the humidity that is inside that grain. If the humidity is 0.1 or 2, too much or too little, it's not time. They have to wait for the grain to dry. And if they wait too long, it's too late. They need that grain to have the exact amount, maybe it's like 10.2, I think it was the exact amount of moisture that grain was to have when they cut it, so that it no longer dries any further or receives any moisture. And then they go and they harvest that, and then they take it in the trucks and try to sell it. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to measure the moisture inside that grain. And if you want good prices, you're going to have that exact amount of moisture. You see, there is a window of time in which you must harvest. If you harvest too soon, they're green. They're not yet ripe. It still needs nutrition. It still needs care and attention. It's still developing and not ready to harvest quite yet. Of course, then there is ripe. Ripe means ready for harvest. This is the right time, the prime time for harvest. In this phase, the crop is fully mature. But then if you wait just a little too long, it's rotten, no longer usable. It's wasted. It is a tragic missed opportunity. I read to you from Joel 3. Joel 1:11 says this, "Be ye ashamed, O ye husbandmen. Howl, O you vine dressers, for the wheat and for the barley, because the harvest of the field is perished." Harvest is only effective at one stage. And I don't know exactly how long the window is to be able to reach in and to save that one person. To see that person saved before it is too late. I do know that right now we are living in the middle of the window of harvest. I don't know if that window of harvest is going to end today or tomorrow. It certainly didn't end with the last, solar eclipse, nor the previous, 150 solar eclipses. Crazy how we always think there's something amazing happening when, there's a solar eclipse. Didn't happen last week, no. But it could happen today. Especially when no man expects it. Could happen tomorrow. And then the window closed. Here's as a warning. It is a warning to seize the opportunity for spiritual harvest. That same warning, we just read it from Joel. It was in the Old Testament. The same warning is here in the book of Matthew chapter 9 where we've been reading. The same warning. Jeremiah 8:20 says this, "The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we're not saved." John 9:4 says this, and this is where we get work for the night is coming. It says, "I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work." That's where we get that hymn from. It's not a time to sleep on the job right now. It's not a time to focus on the fun and on the vacations, while fun and vacations are not wrong. If that becomes our sole pursuit, then we as a Christian have become useless vine dressers. And we are going to miss the window for harvest. This is a time for us to be doing everything that we can to reach out to the lost around us. Jesus had a conviction about the abundant need. So much so that he takes the opportunity to speak it to his disciples and to turn it into a parable in a sense, a word picture to help them to understand. You look around you and you see people. You see people that are angry. You see people that are upset. You see people that are stealing. You see people that are cursing. You see people that won't go to the synagogue. You see people that won't listen to you when you share the gospel. But Jesus says, do you know what I see when I look at them? You see trouble. You see a waste of your time and effort. You see frustration when you look at them. I see a harvest ripe and ready if somebody will just go out there. He says at the end in verse number 38, "Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into the harvest." Do you think that it is God's fault for not sending enough laborers into the harvest that we are not seeing enough people saved? Is it God's fault for not sending enough? I think the obvious answer to that is, well, no. It's our fault for not answering the call and going when we should have. His conviction was so great that it motivated Jesus to action. And so it completely affects Jesus' entire lifestyle and his entire ministry because he was hardwired to love the people and to care. He was hardwired to see them through eternal lenses. And so he looked at those people, and it didn't matter if they were calling him names or beating him or pulling his beard out. It didn't matter if they were trying to stone him. It didn't matter if they were in the back corner of the room whispering to each other, trying to come up with a way to destroy him or stop him. He didn't just see useless causes, he saw hearts that needed to be saved. But he had another conviction as well. While he saw the need, and it was a great need, he understood that there was, number two, an absent workforce. There was an absent workforce. No matter how urgent the command was, no matter how great the needs of the people were, there was still a lack of a lack of laborers for that spiritual harvest. Which is why here in Matthew chapter number 9, he's speaking to his disciples and he is trying to encourage them. Jesus looks out at the multitude. And it'd be easy for you and I to look out at a multitude of people. I can't possibly get to know them all. I can't possibly get to sit down and have a meaningful conversation with all of them. I can't save them all. Can I even save one? It'd be easy for me to think that way. Jesus looked out at that crowd and felt so strongly about it, but he didn't just snap his fingers and make them all saved or make them all listen. He turned to his disciples. Why? Because he understood something. He was not going to be here forever. There was only that short period of time where he was going to be here walking and talking and teaching with his disciples. And it was during that time that he needed to teach them exactly what they needed to hear and what they needed to do and to prepare them for their service. And even after he died, what do his disciples do? They go back and they hide. They go back to fishing. Jesus has to come back once more to them and say, no, listen. Go out there, preach, go out there, teach, go out there, baptize. He has to commission them again to go out there and to do what it is he's been telling them to do all along. Every Christian can be involved in collecting this harvest. But why aren't more people doing it? Jesus is praying more laborers to join the harvest. But sometimes it's because we don't have that same fruit of compassion that he has, that we don't put in the effort, that we are absent from the workforce, and we leave the laborers to others. I read a story about a little girl. She went to go help harvest the corn. I've witnessed this same kind of principle with my kids and working in the garden. She was out with her grandparents harvesting corn for the very first time on the farm. Super exciting, right? Can't wait to get out there and harvest the corn. This is going to be so much fun. And of course, it seemed fun for like 5 minutes. After 10 minutes, the little girl started to complain, and she looked at Grandma and she's like, "You do know you can just go buy this at the store, right?" Sometimes we're like that little girl, and we tend to delegate our personal responsibility of sharing the gospel to others. And we say, well, you know what? I'm giving my money to the missionaries. Let them do it. You know what? I'm giving my money to the preacher or to the church, and not me. You're not giving it to me, but, and let them buy tracts. Let him go out and, witness to folks. And we feel like we're delegating our responsibility to somebody else so that we can forego our own personal evangelism. But that was not the design. That was not the intention. We were intended to witness ourselves. We were intended to be that light. To not just live that light, but speak that light. We were intended to memorize those scriptures and then to use those scriptures as we witness. It's an incredible opportunity we have to labor and to partner with God and to go out and to work in his fields. It's the greatest work that there is on this earth. I could go out and I could go door to door collecting census data. Or I could go door to door trying to sell something. Maybe Girl Scout cookies or something. I could go door to door trying to sell solar panels. And they come multiple times every year to my door trying to sell me solar panels. And they don't take no for an answer. You know what? I'm going to start being as importune as they are when they come to my door. Like, hey, I just came over to blah, blah, blah. No, it's okay. I'm not interested. Oh, okay. Well, what about, no, I'm not. I had to tell the person I'm not interested 7 times before they gave up and left. And that was after like 10 minutes. I said more than just I'm not interested, but I said I was not interested. I don't want to hear your spiel, and I don't want to sit down for 4 hours and talk about solar panels on my roof. But that aside, man, what if we were as importune about sharing the gospel as the solar panel guys were? Or as the ones trying to sell vacuums, those $3,000 vacuums, who try to guilt trip you over and over and over again into buying their vacuum and aren't going to leave until you feel terrible because they failed at their job and had to call their boss right in front of you. And they did this in our living room and tell their boss, they just didn't do a good enough job. And can you talk to my boss and just tell him where I failed in my presentation that makes you not want to buy this? It's like, it's $3,000. That's why I don't want to buy it. $50, okay. I'm not paying $3,000 for a vacuum, no matter how amazing you make it sound. Man, what if we were as importune with the gospel as some folks are about putting money in their pocket? They don't care if they offend somebody. They'll get sales that way. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go out there and offend people. But I think sometimes maybe we give up a little too easily. It is the most important job in the world to seek souls out for Christ. And our effort may not yield immediate results. We understand this. We go into it expecting that. Now, that can be a great discouragement for some folks, especially at the beginning, because to be just shut down time and time and time again, to see little to no results time and time and time and time again. But like I said last week, man, you can't see the seed germinating under the soil. And you can't see that sprout coming. It isn't until that sprout pushes its way through the soil at the top that you really know something's going on in there. And that may take time. But we're not doing it by ourselves. We're doing it with one another. We may even be doing it with other Christians who have witnessed to that person that we don't even know about. But we're certainly doing it with the power of the Holy Spirit. And it is He that gives the increase. So when you walk away from that door and you feel like your words didn't make it through, or you didn't have the exact pitch or presentation that was going to grab a hold of them, don't walk away discouraged, because it wasn't yours to do. It wasn't your power that you were lacking. It wasn't a matter of you didn't try hard enough. I mean, unless you just really, really did a bad job, I guess that's possible. I've seen guys stick the foot in the door, won't let people close the door just so they can shout a few more Bible verses in the door. That's a terrible idea. But it's the Holy Spirit's power that we need. We can go and we can share the gospel, but don't walk back down that sidewalk discouraged. But you know what you also should not do? Get to the point where we're cynical enough that when we walk up the sidewalk, we assume nothing's going to happen. That's another one that's easy to get caught into, isn't it? It's like, oh, here's another day soul winning. I'm going to share the gospel with my neighbor one more time, but you know what? It's not going to change anything. Nothing's going to happen. And so we go into it already defeated. Why bother even putting the seed in the soil if you don't plan for it to actually come up? You cannot, cause somebody to receive the seed of the gospel. But the Holy Spirit has the power. Of course, in 1 Corinthians 3, verse number 6, we see where Paul says, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. In other words, you're not of pastor this or of pastor that or of that Bible college or of this circle. You're of Jesus Christ, okay? I planted some. Apollos did some watering. God's the one that gives the increase. Don't just say, well, I'm on Paul's side or I'm on Apollos' side. It's God that gives the increase. Later in verse 9, he says, for we are laborers together with God. You walk up that sidewalk, you pick up the phone to call that person, you are laborers together with God. Ye are God's husbandry. Ye are God's building. One person said this, we are to evangelize not because it's easy and not because we may be successful, but because Christ called us to. He is our Lord and we have no other choice but to obey Him. Well, that's a whole good reason as to why we ought to be soul winners. Not because it's easy. Certainly not. Especially if you're thinning on top and you got to have this long wave of hair to cover it, and then the wind's blowing like it has been doing the past several months, and then your hair's always standing up like this, like a sail. Soul winning may not be easy. And it certainly may not always be what we deem to be successful. But that doesn't matter. We're called to go. And God promises that when we sow the seed of the gospel with a heart of compassion, that there is going to be a harvest. We may not know how that harvest or when that harvest. We may not even recognize that harvest sometimes, but there will be one. Psalm 126:6, you know this verse. He that goeth forth with weeping, bearing precious seed, shall without doubt, in case you were wondering what doubtless means, shall without doubt come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. You know as well as I do that not every seed bears a sprout. And I was looking in the garden today and I was like, well, I'm not seeing anything from the celery section, and I'm not seeing anything from the beans or the peas. I'm not seeing anything from, I'm seeing some radishes over there, but for some reason, most of these haven't come up yet. Give them a little bit more time. But if they don't pop, I'm going to have to stick some more seeds down in there, because the ones that were in there didn't germinate, or a bird came and ate them or something. We know that not every seed that is planted is going to yield fruit, but there will nevertheless be a harvest if you plant enough seeds. And then we look at verse number 38, the commission of Jesus. Jesus, yes, he exercised compassion. Jesus had conviction. He had conviction as he looked out at that crowd that there was a great need. He felt it, and he was determined to do what he could to be a part of it. Now, Jesus, with his great power and his infinite wisdom, I can't match that great power and that infinite wisdom. And it's very easy sometimes for us to get discouraged and say, I can't save the world. I can't make much of a difference. You ever hear the story about that little boy on the seashore? A great storm had come and washed a whole bunch of starfish, up onto the beach. And of course, outside the water, they're all suffocating. They're going to die. But there was hundreds of thousands of them up on that shore. And this little boy was grabbing them and he was throwing them back into the water. And somebody comes to him and like, kid, you're not going to be able to get all of these starfish back in that water. Most of these are still going to die. You can't make that much of a difference in all of this. The boy said, yeah, but I can make a difference to that one. He tossed it back in the water. And that one, he'd toss it back in the water. Now, I cannot make a difference in all of Verona or all of Augusta County. I don't know most of them. I don't have access or influence to most of them. But between us, wow, that's a lot of influence right there. That's a lot of people, especially those of you that were born and raised here, a lot of people you know that need to hear the gospel. And you may just be able to make a difference in one life. And it matters to them. When you see them up there on the street of gold in heaven, it matters to them. Think about seeing the one as they at the great white throne judgment are, their names not found written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And then they are taken by angels and dragged off from there. Imagine locking eyes with them. If you shared the gospel with them and they rejected it, it's still, I'm sure, going to be sad. It'll be far more sad if they lock eyes with you and then they recognize you and the words rise to their lips, why didn't you tell me this was coming? In verse number 38, he says, pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest. First, we see a commission to pray. You see, the harvest is so important that we don't just need to engage ourselves in it. We also need to pray for others. I've said many times that prayer is so important. It's not just a matter of us going out and putting tracts on doors, but we need to pray over those tracts. And we need, yes, people talking to people, but we also need people praying for the people talking to people. We need people praying for the people we're going to talk to. I just said people a whole lot of times in those sentences. We need people praying. It says, pray ye therefore. Pray in this verse is translated from the Greek word deomai, which means to ask, even stronger, to beg. Even our prayers for the lost ought to have some urgency to them. Consider here, Jesus left us with one prayer request directly from his heart. What is his prayer request? What does he tell us, yea, even beg us to pray for? Lost souls. For the harvest. A request even for more laborers. Has this request made it onto your prayer list? Do you on a regular basis pray, beg God to send more workers into the harvest? I was thinking about Moses as I was preparing for next Sunday's sermon, and Moses, he didn't even begin to complete his job as a deliverer of Israel until he was old. Then God calls him out of the backside of the desert and brings him to Egypt, to his people, to begin to deliver them and to serve God in a full-time manner. We can't excuse ourselves because of age. We can't excuse ourselves because of anything. If God has called us to serve, we are to serve. Maybe we would see more fruit of compassion if we would engage in compassionate prayer. Praying for someone with compassion. I've said before, it's hard to hate somebody that you pray for. Because when you're sitting there and you're trying to pray and ask God to handle the situation or help them with whatever was going on, you begin to get on their side a little bit. And you begin to forget the hurt and the anger as you begin to try to figure out what might be going on in their life. What ways can you help as you pray and have compassion? It is a commission to pray, but it's also a commission to send. His prayer is that more laborers will be sent into the field. This means that laborers who will go to every type of person, laborers that will go into every type of environment. I don't want to go to Pakistan to share the gospel. I don't want to go to Yemen to share the gospel. Those sound like some scary places. To go into Iran to try to plant a church, that sounds like a scary place. But you know what? There's guys doing that right now. They're in there secretly being missionaries. You know what? I don't want to go to China. As much as I'd like to see China, but to go in as a missionary, but you know what? There's guys doing that right now. Going in as English teachers and other things so that they have the opportunity to share the gospel with people and to start underground churches. And praise the Lord for people who are willing to go to every environment and every community, not just the wealthy and the influential, but also to the poor and the downtrodden. Everyone needs to hear that they can be saved. And of course, in Mark 16:15, we see Christ's final commission. We call it the Great Commission, where he said unto them, "Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." To every creature. I understand the physical dangers of going to an uncontacted tribe, let's say in the Amazon River Basin or some islands even. There are international laws and laws in various countries that prevent people from going into those uncontacted tribes as missionaries or anything. Because we have diseases that they've never experienced and have no immunity to. And so we can come in and just simply by being there, wipe out the entire tribe. So I understand that there needs to be some thought given to that. There's a particular island tribe. Recently, a missionary snuck his way out onto that island and they killed him there on the beach. And of course, he's made fun of all over the place because he never should have been there. But just leave them as they are. Just let them be their pristine selves. Really, the pristine headhunting, naked selves, living on that island with little to no food infrastructure, with great abuses going on amongst themselves. That's what we should leave them to be. Does anybody think that maybe they would actually benefit from some civilized society? Well, that aside, yeah, they need to hear the gospel. Even if you think to yourselves, we don't need to be there, we don't need to endanger their lives, I can understand that. But we are not just endangering their lives, but we are endangering their eternity. by not following through in bringing the gospel to them. But this even includes our own community. We ought not be bashful about sharing the gospel to our own community, to our own people. We ought not be shy about letting people see on the internet that we are a Christian. We ought not be shy about posting, the gospel, whether it be, video, audio, or even the written word. We ought not be shy about letting our neighbors know that we are faithful goers to church, that we are Christians, and that we have a message to share with you too. But it's very easy to be shy. In Luke 14:23, and the Lord said unto his servant, go out into the hedges and the highways and the hedges, and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. Sharing the gospel doesn't end next door. We're to bring it to every person. We're to also send others to share the gospel in places we'll never go. In Acts 1:8, I talked about this verse this morning. What happens when you get filled with the Holy Spirit? When you get filled with the Holy Spirit, he says, but ye shall receive power. And after that, the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses. We are to share the message of salvation with those who live in our community, and we're still supposed to have a passion for those who live even further away that we cannot reach. I sometimes get torn between, like with gospel videos, little short videos that I try to put up, between trying to just focus on our area and people around here, and then just posting it and it reaching whoever it reaches. I want to build the church. But at the same time, everybody needs to hear the gospel. And if somebody in Singapore hears or watches that video and chooses to get saved, praise the Lord. They may never come to our church. They may never come and serve, but you know what? Praise the Lord. And I don't know what kind of fruit that's going to yield down the road. And I may never find out about it. I may never know who has read a gospel tract that I have given them. It's quite possible that it has happened and they got saved. Or watched a gospel video and got saved and I never heard about it. No one ever told me, they never reached out. But that doesn't preclude me from the responsibility to do so. Here we see Christ's only prayer request. In his only prayer request here that he gives to us to pray, we see deep into his heart of compassion. That's what we're talking about here, the fruits of compassion. Asking him, praying, begging him to send more laborers into the harvest. But for me to actually have that heart of compassion, I have got to have a mind like Christ, which means I have to spend time with him. That way, when I look out at the world around me, I see them the way he does, because I've heard him say it so many times. That's part of what spending time with Christ does. Also, through this prayer request, we see his personal commission, a commission to pray for more laborers and a commission to carry the gospel to the lost. So what stirred Jesus' compassion again? It was stirred by the great needs that he saw. He saw past the external. They may have appeared abrasive on the outside, like they didn't need a thing, like they had no worries in the world, or even like they hated everybody around them and everybody just annoyed them. And to us, that abrasive exterior says, I'm not interested in the gospel. That's the billboard they're displaying purposefully. Why? Because they know they're susceptible to it. There's a reason I don't watch Hallmark videos. There's multiple reasons, but one of the main ones is I can be too emotional at times. So if I'm afraid that if I watch one of them, they're going to get me crying, and I can't have that. So I don't watch Hallmark movies. I don't watch those sad kind of movies where the mothers die or people have cancer or those kind of things. I don't have any interest in watching that stuff. Give me something a little more uplifting than that. I'm not interested in that. I don't want to cry. But when I spend time with Christ, I begin to see past that exterior of those people and to see the hurts and the pains that have caused them to put up that front of abrasiveness. John 3:16, you know that. For God so loved the world. For he loved the world so much. This is how much he loved the world, This is the extent to which he loved the world. That. What was he willing to do? How far was he willing to go because of his compassion for the world? That he gave. He gave. It wasn't taken from him. Jesus' own life wasn't taken from him. Even Jesus himself gave. He gave his only begotten Son. That whosoever, why did he do this? So that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. We see again God's heart of compassion, as well as Jesus' heart of compassion. Now I want you to think about this coming week. What would the fruit of compassion look like in your life this week? If you were to allow yourself to just think like Christ for one whole week, what kind of fruit might that bear? Last Thursday? Yeah, Thursday. We went down to Valley Baptist, and they had the Shining Light players there, and they had a play / musical, and it's a Christian group. I knew some of them at Pensacola. They were teachers there when I was there, and they did a presentation called In His Steps. Apparently, it's the third best-selling book in the world. I was not aware of that. But they did this presentation about In His Steps, and it's basically all about this singular idea of what would Jesus do? And you see the 1890s aristocracy, and these were Christians, the wealthy, uppity people in the church wanted absolutely nothing to do with the poor, the destitute, even the children who were being addicted to alcohol and then forced into slave labor because there was no minimum age on alcohol back then. And so they were addicting children to alcohol and then forcing them into slave labor in the U.S. And these uppity Christians, even the preacher himself, refused to acknowledge the things that were going on and tried to ignore it when they came and were confronted with it. But then God got a hold of their heart. And one by one, you begin to see them change. And all of a sudden, you have these wealthy uptown people begin to kind of pull away from the others, much to their scorn. What? You're going to that place? What? You're being around those people? That's just not right. You shouldn't be doing that in polite society. But they went and they began to witness to these people, and they began to see them get saved. And it caused some problems all around, but it changed their lives. They made a determination for 1 year. They were going to try to do everything in their life with this question in mind: how would Jesus handle this situation? What would Jesus do in my shoes right now? And for 1 whole year, they decided that they were going to make every decision in that way. And it changed their lives. And in the book, people were sent to the mission field. People, surrendered to the mission field because of it. People surrendered to the ministry because of it. And many people were saved. Because some uppity church people decided to finally let Jesus' compassion show through them. You and I have benefited from the compassion of Christ. We've seen forgiveness of sins. We currently have peace with God. We have a promised hope and future in heaven. So how might we share that same compassion with the world around us? I'm not going to ask you to make a year-long commitment, but just this week, ask yourself, how can this week I allow the compassion of Jesus Christ to affect what I do and say this week? Stop and think about that and how you respond to your spouse or even the kids when they're aggravating you, or the grandkids or great-grandkids, I don't know. And how you respond to your coworker or the driver that cut you off or the person in front of you at McDonald's who is using too many curse words. How can I show the compassion of Christ this week? Let it show in me this week. Food for thought as we continue here on our study of bearing spiritual fruit. Next week, we're going to begin talking about the fruits of biblical ministry as we go into 2 Corinthians 5.